Hello and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. A couple of quick announcements before we bring on our guest for today. We have our Breakthrough Alliance Challenge. Applications are open until the end of October. We also have our Versali Challenge, specifically in the menopause space, with the opportunity to win $2,500 with that challenge. To make sure that you apply to that. And of course, we have our symposium for September coming up next week. And with that, we'd like to introduce our guest for today, Jennifer Hoxplant, who's the CEO of NYBio. Thanks so much for being here, Jennifer.
Thanks, Nina. I'm excited to join you today.
I'm so excited to dive in and not only learn a little bit more about yourself, but also, all of the amazing work that you've got going on over at NYBio. So I think with that, maybe a great place to start is if you could just tell us a little bit more about your background, education, career, what's really led you to where you are right now.
Yeah, I'll try to, I'll give you the 30-second version. And it's so fun for me not only to join you to talk about women's health, but to join the HIT Lab team. But also during the pandemic at NYBio, my colleague Derek Brand and I started a webinar, and we did weekly webinars.
Love that.
I think we ended up being close to 200 webinars.
Wow.
And so it is fun for me to be on this side, the
Yes.
question answering side versus the question asking side. No, so I'm very excited. So it's interesting, you meet throughout life sciences, you meet individuals that have all different backgrounds, right? Some people are
Mhm.
very science driven, they have been in the lab, that is their passion, and they're working toward advancing right treatments and cures for patients. You have other people that are in different roles, and I come to life sciences through really a policy legal background. So
Hmm.
I started my post undergrad career working on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and went to law school. My first exposure to the industry was as I like to say, baby litigator, randomly
Wow.
assigned in the litigation group to do pharmaceutical products defense litigation. So I was doing products liability defense, and our clients were pharma companies. So that literally was my first
Mm.
exposure to the industry. And I loved the work. I loved telling the story through the lens of drug development and discovery, and all of the work and safety work that was done right to bring a drug to market. So
Mhm.
when I had the opportunity later in my career to go in-house, I jumped at that. So I have
Mm.
worked in national trade associations in Washington, D.C., and then worked in-house at GlaxoSmithKline,
Mm.
Schering-Plough, and then most recently at Merck, where I was for almost a decade before I came to NYBio. And so partly it was really fun for me to also be focused on a specific geography, really, right, with New York and everything that was happening here. In my previous roles, I showed up sort of wherever was needed. So lots of
Right.
airplane time. Now it's lots of subway time, I suppose.
Probably.
And I won't, but sometimes it might take just as long to go from one part
Hmm.
of the city to the other as it might have to fly somewhere in another
That
role.
that definitely checks out. That is incredible. What a rich kind of background, and it must have been so incredible to be able to view and see all of these different lenses, kind of working as a baby litigator, legislator, to now kind of being in house, and now to your role right now. I'm so curious because your mission, what you're doing at New York Bride, we'll kind of get into that in a minute. But I could only imagine, right, that all of your past experiences have really driven and informed the work that you're doing right now, and would love if you could share a little bit more about how have your kind of previous roles, shaped the vision or has kind of led to the vision of NYBio and what you're really hoping to accomplish.
Yeah, so it is interesting, right? I mean, like there is no other option than for us to take our experiences, and hopefully we
Hmm.
internalize them, we turn them into something, right, that is helpful for the next role and for the role after that. But hopefully we
Definitely.
make everyone else that works with us along the way a little bit richer in their experiences as well. So basically, having had the experience at a national trade association as well as in-house, it
Hmm.
really and then while I was at Merck, I also helped stand up a brand new trade association focused specifically around the take back of unused medicines, right?
Oh,
So,
interesting.
sort of building a trade association from the ground up on a specific issue,
Right.
seeing things from member companies' perspective and recognizing where a trade association is beneficial and helpful and where it may not be. So
Hmm.
having sat in all of the seats of the stakeholders that New York Bio engages with is really helpful to me as the New York Bio team and I help the ecosystem. And by that,
I
I
love that.
mean, so and we can't raise hands because we're not in person, but if I asked the audience today, like, tell me what a trade association is for you. One person would raise their hand and they would say it's a you for us in Albany or Washington, D.C. True.
Hmm.
They would say you help provide discounts to early stage companies. True. They would say somebody else would say, oh well, it's where I do a pitch competition to get better at my pitch so that I can raise money, right, for my company.
Hmm.
Also true.
Yeah,
Another person may say, oh, it's because it's where I find great networking and I meet other people in the industry. Also true. So a
definitely.
trade association is what you make of it and where you
Hmm.
sit in our ecosystem.
Definitely.
And it is, for those who I've talked to before, I've said it is the beauty and the challenge in an
Hmm.
organization that is as broad across the ecosystem, meaning we can't be everything to everyone, but we can
Right.
provide pieces of connection to all the parts of the ecosystem to hopefully make us stronger all together.
I love that. I think that's so incredible. And I definitely agree about kind of being able to take experiences and have them kind of what you make it. And really
Yeah.
the beauty of that. And I think on that note too, I mean, with New York Bio and kind of the organization that you have, you're really centered around driving and fostering, innovation, research development with a huge variety of stakeholders, I would imagine. But I think before I pick your brain about that, would love if you could just tell us a little bit more about kind of the mission of New York Bio and kind of really the impact that you're looking to make.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are the leading advocate for the life sciences industry in the state of New York. And we do
Okay.
all of those things that I just mentioned in passing, right? So we provide advocacy. We
Hmm.
lobby in Washington, D.C., as well as in Albany for policies that support not only the growth of life sciences, companies' abilities to grow here, find workforce here, right?
Right.
Work, do research and development here, but also for with our partners who are patient advocacy organizations, patient research
Mm.
foundations, for things that are important to those individuals, which is often access to new therapeutics and the ability, right,
Hmm.
to access those therapeutics when they're approved and not having to wait longer amounts of time, as do some individuals, unfortunately, in other parts of the world where they have a different,
Right.
right, process. And so New York Bio, we do a lot of convening. We are really good at convening our stakeholders. Just last week, we
Hmm.
had over 350 people gather for our innovation summit.
Oh,
And
wow.
we have, yeah, so it's great. Like HitLab does a fantastic job with their symposiums and summits. And similarly, we hosted an event
Hmm.
last week that had different panels and fireside chats and vision talk conversations and a lot of networking. That is one thing that we realized several years ago is that panels are very great and they're informative and they spark a lot of kind of cool conversations, but really people also want to have plenty of time to network at events like we do,
Definitely.
where they're industry
Hmm.
events. So we have brushed up on our networking time and have added more of that even to all of our events.
I love that. I think there's so many questions I want to ask you. There's so much I want to get into.
Yes.
But I think one of them, Jennifer, is a little bit more. I mean, I think it's so incredible kind of talking a little bit about, really the role that New York Bio can serve. Can you share more about some of the other, like some of the ways that your organization kind of works with the members and the community more broadly? I know I heard like, opportunities for gathering and kind of coming together. Are there any kind of other ways to be involved in the organization?
Yes. So we have lots of ways. Obviously, our it's an organization of members, right? We're a membership
Hmm.
organization, and so companies join New York Bio, and then that company membership extends to all of its employees, right?
Oh,
So
nice.
if a company is a member, then every employee within that company has member access, right, to the things we do, the
Mm.
programs we run, and the opportunities we provide. One thing that is interesting, particularly when it relates to early stage companies. And we have
Okay.
a lot of early stage companies across our ecosystem, definitely in New
Mm.
York, but really across, right, across the globe. We're seeing more and
Yeah.
more entrepreneurs in life sciences. They're spinning out. We're certainly seeing a lot more femtech, health tech, right? Like women's health focus work, which
Hmm.
I think is fantastic. Not the
Definitely.
least of which because I may be a beneficiary, right, of these
Yeah.
advancements one day.
Hmm.
But I also think that early stage companies need help. Obviously, it is extremely expensive to start up. You have to raise capital. Often
Hmm.
that comes at the early stage from friends and
Right.
family, even before a seed round. And so, one thing that New York Bio and other trade associations are really good at is leveraging all of the members across our various platforms to provide volume discounts that a
Mm.
startup company of two people couldn't go to a lab supply company and say, okay, we have two people, we're gonna outfit a very small lab bench and we'd like some significant discounts because you just don't
Right.
have scale.
Hmm.
However, New York Bio is able to harness the large purchasing power of our entire organization to help provide discounts to companies. And so
Wow.
that is a real game changer, along
100%.
with we have a special category of membership that's called a fellows member. And these
Hmm.
are early stage companies, less than 7.5 million raised in funding, and it's basically an on ramp. The first year is totally free, and you get really reduced rates to meetings we do and things like that. It is basically a scholarshiped ability for a company to join New York
Amazing.
Bio and take advantage of all the things that other companies can take advantage of without having to commit as much resources, because we want all of those
Incredible.
resources to go into de-risking and to go into advancing the science that those companies are working on.
Wow, that's incredible. And the fact that, you're kind of serving this huge population to your point, and really having services and offering center to the startup space, I think is so amazing. And I think on that note, like you had mentioned a little bit earlier, this is a pretty wide encompassing ecosystem that has, I would imagine, very different players with sometimes very different agendas or
Yes.
just kind of priorities. So what are kind of some of the ways that you kind of could bring folks together to kind of, have that shared vision of advancement more broadly? Is that kind of something that you have a structure in place? Any tips and tricks that you can give us when it comes to wrangling people with different kind of priorities?
Yes. So yeah, the wrangling
Big
is
question.
always the challenge.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, the wrangling is the challenge. And I will say though that one thing that we have found to be consistent is the desire for companies in our ecosystem to support
Hmm.
innovation, right? So
I love that.
I think you can't get away from the fact that yes, while one company may be working on gene therapy or oncology, another company may be working on rare disease, another company is women's health focused or reproductive health focused. What we're seeing is everyone supports innovation, and we're all cheering each other on in this quest to innovate, bring therapies, treatments, modalities, new modalities to
Hmm.
patients. And so I think that as long as we don't forget that, then
Definitely.
the theme of innovation will sort of win out. And so, yes, sometimes you may listen to a panel at a New York Bio event that isn't directly related to your day job and what you're doing in your own sort of journey,
Hmm.
but there may be takeaways from that conversation or the questions that are asked that are
Definitely.
applicable. And so we just ask, especially when we have large gatherings like we did last week, we ask our members to recognize that we want to provide something for everyone.
Yeah.
And so to take advantage of hearing the things that will be helpful And, and if it's something that's totally unrelated to you, maybe you're spending that time in the hall networking, or maybe you're returning some emails during that
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, right. It's just being judicious
Mhm.
and recognizing that everyone contributes to the
Yeah.
success of the ecosystem.
And I love that. I love kind of that, like almost opting in that shared vision of, we may kind of have different lenses to it, but we're all kind of having and driving towards that same outcome of innovation. So I think that's really beautiful that you're really able to kind of bask in that energy and see that with these types of large events.
Yeah,
Absolutely love
and
that.
like I said, it is beautiful, and it can be a challenge. And
They
I
typically
will
are.
say, yes, yes. And one thing that we have done at New York Bio, which is when I first got to New York Bio, which was 6 years ago. Gosh, it's hard to believe. It's There was still a lot of like kind of what is new, what is the New York ecosystem like? Where will we be? And for New York Bio, right, we were figuring out how we could best serve the growing ecosystem. And one thing that we honed in on, so New York is a lot of things, one of the most diverse populations in the world, which is amazing for our clinical trial work, right? And the research and
Mm,
development. It doesn't get much better, right, than being able to do R&D here and in this region. But from a New York Bio perspective, one thing that New York unequivocally is capital markets and finance. And so we've really
right.
leaned in to our partnerships with venture firms, with private equity, right, with hedge funds, and
Hmm.
working and capital markets. And so we have
Hmm.
a long-standing partnership with the New York Stock Exchange, and we
Wow.
actually do a life science showcase of companies. These are sort of Series A plus companies. We've had
Hmm.
a number of them, right, that are women's health focused and diagnostic devices,
Wow.
digital therapeutics, right? And so they will present once a year. This year it is December 9th, to a finance, an invitation only finance audience. So they are doing a pretty, like a 20-minute, right, presentation of their
Hmm.
deck, a finance audience. And then we end the day with our New York Bio holiday reception, which is open to everyone at the
Love
New York
that.
Stock Exchange. So it's a nice combination of leaning into our community, but also really understanding that New York is this amazing intersection of finance, research and development opportunities, early stage companies, and kind of pulling that all together in one day event.
Wow. That sounds, I live in California, but I want to fly just to come to this holiday reception. That sounds
Yeah,
amazing.
it's it is super cool. And I will tell you that we've had California companies present,
Oh,
and we've
lovely.
definitely had people come in. So and then what's not to love about Manhattan during the holidays?
I mean, come on. That's amazing. And I
Except
think, I
maybe
mean,
the
again,
traffic.
yeah, but that, it's the lights are worth it. I'm very okay with that. And I think it's so incredible how you really are kind of seeing not only just the life sciences ecosystem, but just New York more broadly and kind of a lot of the synergies in place there, which I think is really powerful. I really love that. And I think one of the things that you had also mentioned too, kind of speaking of just, being able to like listen to the community and listen more broadly. I know you had also mentioned you do a lot of work with like the patient advocacy group kind of side as well, and kind of gaining their input, which I would imagine is invaluable, right, to your members and just to the organization. Um, I'm so curious if you could share a little bit more about the role that patient advocacy groups can play. And I'm also really curious, you had also mentioned when you were kind of first speaking about this group, about some of the kind of universal challenges that you're hearing from like the patient side, things like access, et cetera. So if you have any other like
Yeah.
nuggets that you've been hearing, would also love to hear that as well.
Yeah, no, thanks, Nina. I really appreciate that question. I think for a long time, um, we, I won't say we didn't, but I would say we missed in the industry, missed the opportunity to engage patients, patient stakeholders, caregivers at the earliest stages of drug discovery and development. And I
Mm,
think that has changed. I think it is changing. I think where you sit may determine your opinion on how fast it's changing, whether they're right, there needs to be more.
right.
But I think we've really seen it. And the number of patient research foundations, patient advocacy organizations that have a presence in New York is significant, and it
Amazing.
is growing. And we made a concerted effort several years ago. I think we're about to do our fourth patient advocacy summit in the spring. This year, ours was in March. We are locking down dates now for 2025. And we bring in research foundations, organizations, and ask them to invite their volunteers, right? Their staff,
Mm,
their volunteers. And it is a day long, it's a conversation on topics that are of interest, a lot of policy, obviously, because that's where we
hmm.
work most closely together, right? On that
Right.
access policy, the legislative proposals that may restrict access or
Hmm.
increase access, right? In New York last year, we were able to help pass biomarker testing, right? In
Oh, wow.
oncology, rare disease, looking at expanding the use of biomarker testing. And so basically, there are a lot of places that patient groups and biotech companies, pharma companies work very closely together, but we have to put in the work of understanding the things that are most important to the patients so that when
Hmm.
we are advocating on our behalf and their behalf, that we're all rowing in the same direction.
Hmm.
And the goal is always the same, which is bring more treatments to patients more quickly and safely so that fewer people suffer, right?
That's
And
fantastic.
so by ensuring that we build those relationships in advance, we're
Hmm.
helping each other along the way. Then when the time comes, we are all able to jump into action and advocate for those important
Right.
pieces of the policy.
Absolutely. And I think speaking of advocacy, that being such, core component of the work that you do, and that definitely being, you're solving a very big problem that is healthcare when it comes and drug development and life sciences and just
Yeah.
the big, this is like the meat and potatoes kind of stuff. And I'm so curious. I mean, there's so much great work to be done and the great work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Are there any particular focus areas for you kind of when it comes to the current kind of advocacy policy work that you're doing? Any kind of particular areas of priority for you right now?
Yeah, so there are the things that we work on consistently, ensuring, I'll give you an example, like ensuring that the prescriber, meaning the physician, the nurse practitioner, the nurse can always write the most appropriate prescription for a patient. And
Mm,
sometimes every year in the New York legislature, there is a piece of legislation that wants to do away with that. And so every year we
mm,
lobby to keep
right.
the prescriber's ability, right, to write the prescription that makes the most sense for that patient at that time. So there are
Hmm.
those sort of tactical pieces. And then there are
Right.
the overarching pieces that we are concerned about, which is really restricting the patient's ability to get access. You hear about other countries, and in some countries, obviously, therapeutic may be approved, but it may be months, even years after we
Mm,
have the availability of that treatment here in the US.
right.
And so one of our main focus areas is trying to help ensure, and we work with colleagues across the country when we're talking about at the federal level,
Hmm.
that we are able to basically support a system that will help US patients get the treatments when they're approved and available, right? So that they don't have long
Yeah.
waits in order to access things that other people have access to.
That is huge. Wow. And and it's crazy. And when you were saying, I for some reason I didn't put it together until just this moment of when you were saying how, you've been with New York Bio for 6 years. So you've seen the dark pandemic days when it came to a lot of this. I'm so curious, have you noticed any like cultural shifts in legislation and policy kind of as the pandemic was a catalyst, or kind of has it been pretty stable?
Um, no, so there was a lot of flux, right? So
Hmm.
during the beginning of the pandemic, obviously we had member companies that were at the forefront developing treatments and
Yeah.
vaccines, and right, so we supported them
Right.
however we could in that process. And then you also, I think for a period of time, there was so much discussion about things that were therapeutic or drug discovery. And people now know how vaccines are sort of developed, or at least they have an
Hmm.
idea. And I think now that that has settled out, we have another
Yeah.
situation where making sure people understand that it wasn't just COVID, that all of that amazing science and that
Mm,
amazing work and the amazing people doing that work
right.
are still doing that, and they're doing it for all kinds of conditions. So that would be my
100%.
takeaway for when I talk to policymakers and legislators, is helping them to understand all of that work continues in a vast array of therapeutic
Absolutely.
conditions and for treatments. Yeah.
100. That's a very good point. I think that it is really kind of, I would imagine, so impactful for them to kind of recognize that, COVID may have been the most talked about, but there's still so much great work for so many, very
Yeah.
meaningful conditions and components. I think that's really impressive and amazing. Wanted to also ask you, because you are kind of at the forefront, you are, really, you have the opportunity to see from so many different lenses. Are there any life science kind of innovations, things that you're seeing, whether, things that you're excited about, things that are coming down the pipeline for you, just personally, things that excite you about where this field is going?
Every day, right? Like every day. I cannot actually even quantify. I open my, my trade emails, my trade press emails every day,
Yeah.
and I find something inspiring. Um, and then, but look, this is high risk, high reward work. The
Yeah.
individuals and the companies that work to develop therapeutics and treatments, um, it 90% of the time these things do not ultimately get to patients, right?
Right.
But with that, even the failures in our industry help provide a pathway for future success. And so
Hmm.
when you do
Beautiful.
read about clinical trials failing or failing to meet their endpoints, or a company sort of shelving a therapeutic or a compound,
Hmm.
what you do see is that work is never in vain. That
Right.
work will also provide information and foundation and future potential breakthroughs. So while not everything everyone works on will ultimately make it into patients, the work is inspiring and it's amazing. And I just watch in awe and plug in and help. And NYBio
That's
helps
amazing.
wherever we can to ensure that this type of system of drug discovery and development remains available, and it helps to provide future treatments for patients.
That's incredible. And I really love how you kind of speak of like the collective and like the collective benefit that
Yeah.
comes from all of this great work that's being done. I realize we're at time, which is crazy, but I had to ask one quick question from our audience members.
Okay.
One of them wanted to know, how might NYBio help early stage companies that are not in the life sciences? I think you just have some really great programming. Everyone wants to be involved. Are there any particular eligibility criteria to kind of be a member?
Yeah, so we do have, so we have had food companies, right, that do
Very cool.
that develop, right, different foods. We have had fashion companies that are doing biologics. We've had beer companies doing beer,
Oh,
right,
wow. Yeah.
because they're all using the scientific method and process,
Right.
developing their whatever that they're working on in their portfolio in their own business.
Hmm.
So there are takeaways and there can be benefits, I think, from networking. If you're
Hmm.
not, even if you're not doing therapeutic, I would say reach out to me on LinkedIn, and if it makes sense for your company, we can totally find a way to plug you in. But yeah, but I
Amazing.
love that in New York, especially, we have so many different types of companies and different
Hmm.
types of entrepreneurs. It is amazing, and I am so glad that I get to participate in the ecosystem.
That's incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time to share more about what you're up to. I think we're going to get a lot of LinkedIn requests because, I mean, what an amazing community that you've built. So really appreciate you just taking the time to chat with us today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nina.
Thank you, Jennifer. Make sure you join us next week for our next Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. Wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsors for sponsoring this incredible conversation. And of course, one last huge thank you to Jennifer for such an incredible discussion today. Really appreciate everyone for taking the time to come listen, and we will see you all next Wednesday. Bye, everyone.